In Ronald's eyes, I was probably just a self-recommended lover. At that time, I had already starred in a few moderately popular dramas, playing either vicious or capricious supporting roles, second, third, or fourth female leads. At the end of the year, when the company's gamble agreement failed and was acquired by him at a low price, he graced the year-end banquet with his presence. That was my opportunity. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. My agent would never have imagined I had such audacity. In fact, she had lined up other sugar daddies for me. No one dared to set their sights on him. He was at the peak of his power, notoriously difficult to deal with, and not known for kindness or a good temper. But I truly didn't want to spend the rest of my life degrading myself by bouncing from one pot-bellied sugar daddy to another. That was the first time I mustered the courage to scheme for myself. When he went alone to the garden terrace to clear his mind, I followed, summoning all my courage. I stood before him with flushed cheeks. He gazed at me with an inscrutable, heavy silence, and under that gaze, my entire body trembled. Yet, I forced myself past the shame to introduce myself, saying, "Mr. Ronald, hello, my name is Camille." He was tall, his eyes sweeping over me with an imperious glance, coolly appraising me from head to toe before finally tilting my chin up with his fingers. My lashes fluttered as I met his gaze, trembling. I knew I was beautiful, most captivating when my eyes shimmered with vulnerability. Sure enough, his eyes narrowed slightly before he waved off the bodyguards who had begun to gather around us. Only after staying by his side for a long time did I realize he was not a man easily swayed by feminine charms. Countless others had offered themselves over the years, yet I was the only one who had come to him in this manner. By my third year with him, even his tight-lipped assistant remarked with rare candor, "Ms. Camille, you are very fortunate. If this were an idol drama, I should have been his destined choice, if not the female lead, then at least a significant supporting character resembling her enough to soften his heart. But I was really just cannon fodder." Much later, I gathered the courage to ask him, why me? He was in a good mood at the time, so he squinted at me and finally replied, "You should be glad you got lucky." I was indeed quite lucky. Back then I was young, so ignorance gave me courage. If I had to do it all over again at my current age, and someone asked if I'd dare to strike up a conversation with Ronald like that, my answer would probably be no. My first date with Ronald took place at the Coliseum. Aside from seeing it on TV, it was my first time setting foot in such a place. Ronald led me to the highest private box, where we looked down upon the scene below, a sea of dark. Roaring crowds in frenzied excitement. In the center of the arena, a man and a tiger engaged in what was almost a one-sided slaughter. I nearly vomited, but I didn't dare. I turned to observe Ronald's expression. His gaze was fixed on the arena, his face nearly unchanged except for a faint twitch between his brows. It wasn't until later, when I became intimately familiar with his every micro-expression, that I realized this meant he was excited. Killing always stirs excitement. That day, whether by unfortunate coincidence or the arena's deliberate design, the tiger broke free and lunged at the crowd that had been cheering moments before. People scattered in panic. The tiger was finally subdued just 2 meters in front of us. Warm blood splattered onto Ronald's hand, and he narrowed his eyes slightly. The arena owner came to apologize in person while he was frowning at the drop of blood on his hand. I think all the wisdom of my life was embodied in that moment. I obediently leaned over and gently licked the blood clean from his hand. He raised his hand, running his fingers through my hair to the nape of my neck, pinching the soft flesh there as if petting a cat. So later, Ronald said I was lucky. I couldn't help but secretly wonder if things hadn't played out that way. He might have tossed me into the center of the arena to fight tigers and lions for all I knew. He was a somewhat inscrutable man. Sometimes he stays at my place, and when I wake up groggily in the morning, I often see him smoking on the balcony. Dawn approaches, the inky indigo sky blurred at the boundary between light and dark, dressed in silver-gray silk pajamas. He sits sideways on the balcony smoking, a faint red glow flickering at his fingertips, bright then dim. He doesn't smoke much, more often he just holds the cigarette between his fingers, gazing down at it. His jet-black hair falls disheveled across his temples, his handsome profile impossibly striking, with lowered lashes. He looks almost melancholic, his heavens-favored son, his business empire beyond imagination. Wealth and power are his. Anything he desires lies within effortless reach. I don't know who could make him show such an expression, nor what matter could trouble and sadden him. He had always been a man of great self-control. There was a period when he smoked heavily and drank excessively. eventually landing himself in the hospital. At that time, his family was taking care of him in the hospital. I pretended to be a passerby and walked past his ward once. He lay on the hospital bed, with a young man and woman standing by his side, showing him something on their phone, holding a peeled apple in his hand. His gaze was gentle as he leaned slightly to look at the phone, and suddenly, a happy smile blossomed on his face. He rarely smiled. During the time we spent together, I had seen only a handful of his smiles. In truth, he was a very serious person. When his heavy gaze fell upon you, it would send shivers down your spine, making you afraid to meet his eyes. So at that moment, I was really curious. What was he seeing that could make him smile like that? I was Ronald's longest-lasting woman, and I think it came down to two things. First, I was genuinely beautiful even in the glamour-saturated entertainment industry. I consistently ranked among the top-tier beauties. Second, I was obedient and well-behaved. You see, most women, especially those around Ronald, couldn't help but grow spoiled from all the flattery they received. Ronald might humor you when he's in the mood, but once he's done, you'd never see him again. I never interacted too much with his subordinates. Occasionally, someone would try to ask me for a favor to reach him, but I'd just smile and politely decline without a word. The most extreme case was when someone brought in a massive piece of jade, half an arm's height, flawless and glowing, placed right in the center of the hall, radiating a soft, luminous sheen. The man leading the group smiled courteously and said, "Ms. Camille, I'm not asking for much, just help me arrange a meeting with Mr. Ronald." Of course, I was tempted. My mind was practically at war, but I kept my composure, smiling serenely. After all, acting was my forte. I didn't even glance at that jade, maintaining an air of otherworldly detachment. As the man left, he even praised me, saying, "Mr. Ronald's people really are something. You've seen it all. How presumptuous of me to think such trifles could sway you. Heaven bears witness, if this piece of jade had a soul and heard itself being called little thing, it might well vomit blood in outrage." In truth, he didn't know my heart was bleeding too. Later, this person found another way to meet Ronald. When he learned of the matter, that jadeite was delivered to the high-rise riverside apartment he'd gifted me that very night. Smiling, he looked at me and said, "A piece of jade like this, it's a wonder you weren't tempted." Then, laughing again, he added, with such timid courage, "I've no idea how you ever dared to recommend yourself to me in the first place." Sometimes, when accompanying him to social events, he'd watch as others fawned over me and tease with a faint, mocking smile, "Don't frighten her. Now, my little girlfriend here has a courage smaller than a mouse's." Oh, yes, he called me his little girlfriend. Among all his companions over the years, I was likely the only one granted such an honor. By my 5th year at his side, rumors spread that an underground gambling den had even set up a betting pool, wagering on whether I'd rise from the branches to become a phoenix, whether I'd finally be made official. The odds for the bet were as high as 1/350, and this wager lasted for 2 years. By the 7th year of my time with Ronald, I placed my bet on no. The thought of earning some extra pocket money after breaking up made me quite happy. I believe no one understands better than I do that the reason I could stay by Ronald's side for so long is precisely because I didn't love him. Of course, that's what he thought, that I didn't love him. Not loving Ronald was 1,000 times harder than falling for him. If you were me, you'd know that given his charisma, it's nearly impossible for anyone not to be drawn to him. After Ronald had been by my side for so long, of course I'd had my wild fantasies too. In my 2nd year with him, I was part of a reality adventure show. One episode was a desert expedition. The dumbass crew dropped 4 of us in the middle of the vast Gobi with minimal survival supplies and told us to last 2 days and 1 night. But the crew's safety measures were a joke. A sandstorm hit at night, cutting us off from the team. I toughed it out for a full day and night, and just when I thought I was going to die alone in that desolate desert, Ronald sent a helicopter to find me in the wilderness. Of course, he didn't come himself, but that didn't stop him from looking like a god descending from heaven in my eyes. See how easy it is to fall for someone. Just one moment, one spark, and all the defenses you've built day and night come crashing down, when everyone around you is saying things like, "Mr. Ronald seems serious about you," or "Mr. Ronald has never treated anyone else the way he treats you," or "Mr. Ronald must be smitten, but who can blame him? You're so beautiful. If I were a man, I'd fall for you too," and so on. You can't help but start to wonder, does he actually have real feelings for me? Thankfully, during that time when my emotions were surging and love felt overwhelming, there were other people by his side. Perhaps Ronald simply had the capital to be a playboy, leading everyone to assume he was surrounded by women. But in truth, he wasn't particularly keen on romantic entanglements, likely finding them troublesome. He never kept more than 2 steady companions at a time, and over the years, I was the only one who met his standards, someone who understood his temperament, remained obedient without growing spoiled, and never schemed against him. That woman was a rising star from my generation, peaking right after her debut with a hit campus drama. Her pure, innocent image resonated deeply, making her a nationwide sensation, and she truly was that naive. Ronald was always generous to those around him. So much so that this starlet seemed to develop some delusions. Within the first month of their relationship, she came to me, adopting the air of the rightful girlfriend, and warned me, "Listen, Ronald is with me now, you'd better back off." I was genuinely stunned, thinking Ronald had been tamed by this innocent flower. The budding feelings I had for him withered instantly until 3 days later, when Ronald summoned me to accompany him to an event. As we left, the once haughty starlet was stopped by his bodyguards, screaming hysterically, stripped of all dignity. "Why, Ronald, how could you just discard me like this? Did I do something wrong?" Ronald frowned slightly. After that, I never saw that starlet again. She even vanished from the screen, fading into obscurity. For a while, I dreamed of her nightly, her tear-streaked face, the undignified way she had begged Ronald. But as the dreams continued, her sobbing face slowly morphed into my own. And Ronald cast a cold, indifferent glance my way and said, "Take her away." Every time, I'd wake up startled by that look, then repeatedly remind myself I must never become the second starlet, because crying is just too ugly and ruins one's image. Gradually, I became the only woman consistently by his side. Everyone said, "Camille truly has clever tactics. Ronald has been tamed by me." Only I would laugh it off. It's simply because the women around him were always too restless. And he found them troublesome. If I actually took it seriously and ran to tell him, "Mr. Ronald, I like you," I believe those would be the last words I'd ever speak to him. The reason I've lasted by his side for so long is simply because I know my place. From the age of 22 to 29, these are the most beautiful years of a woman's life. Before Ella appeared, everyone thought I was the female lead, but when she arrived, they suddenly realized, because every supporting character must return to their rightful place the moment the true heroine appears, just like Cinderella's glass slipper after midnight, with nowhere to hide. The first sign appeared on the front page of a business and finance newspaper. The cover showed him sharing an umbrella with a woman, and the article detailed her background and wealth, speculating that Ronald was entering a marriage of convenience. This wasn't the first time he'd been rumored to be in such an arrangement, but it had always fizzled out before. More than once, I'd imagined his future wife standing haughtily before me, tossing me an unlimited black card to buy me off, but it never happened, so I didn't take it seriously. The second time they appeared together was in entertainment news. He held her hand, tilting his head to gaze intently at her. Because it was a paparazzi shot, the image was distant and blurry, making their expressions unclear, but my heart turned cold. The moment I set the newspaper down, my mind went blank, and my body might have even trembled slightly. "This time is different," another voice in my head told me. For some reason, I suddenly remembered an unrelated incident from long ago. Back when I was just emerging in the entertainment industry, everyone was curious about the powerful backer behind me, and paparazzi would stake out my place day and night. But I wasn't afraid. No one dared to expose Ronald. Still, there was an exception. One paparazzo managed to snap a photo where Ronald didn't show his face, only extending a hand from the car. I placed my hand in his while holding up the hem of my dress, about to bend down and step inside. The photo went viral. People speculated about everything from the style of his half-visible suit cuff to the multi-million-dollar watch on his wrist, even fixating on his slender, well-defined fingers. Countless names, some I knew, some I didn't, were tossed around in the comments. The first thing I did after it trended was rush to see Ronald, standing outside his door. I must have looked utterly frantic, my face pale, as I blurted, "It wasn't me." There had been stars who paid paparazzi to deliberately photograph Ronald for leverage, though they didn't end well, so I desperately insisted, "It wasn't me." He looked at me, gave an absent-minded hum, and said, "I know." Only then did my heart slowly settle. The entertainment industry is never short of news, and this matter gradually faded into obscurity. Later, when I became popular, some people dug it up, but my fans quickly countered the negative publicity and buried it. Now, Ronald and a woman's photo being so blatantly placed at the center of entertainment news can only lead me to one conclusion: it was done with his permission. He allowed this woman to be openly placed by his side. I searched online for Ella. She is the only daughter of a major corporation in City A, exceptionally accomplished from a young age, fluent in 6 languages, a graduate of Harvard with a degree in finance, and an enthusiast of extreme sports. Following the trail, I found her personal account, where she shared numerous photos, gatherings with friends, business meetings, extreme rock climbing. She isn't conventionally beautiful, but her radiant confidence is striking. In one photo, she's hanging off a cliff. Her bare face turned back with a dazzling smile, inexplicably reminiscent of a sunflower in full bloom under the summer sun, just as vibrant and full of life. I've never shown my bare face in front of Ronald, which is probably the self-discipline of a kept mistress, but I truly envy Ella's natural ease. Of course, she has the capital to be so unguarded before Ronald. Meeting Ella happened entirely without any mental preparation on my part. It was at an industry gathering where I was Ronald's +1, dressed to the nines with full makeup exaggerating a little. Every strand of hair was perfectly in place. Standing beside Ronald, I didn't need to speak, just smile. Ella arrived right then, dressed simply yet elegantly. As she passed us, she took a glass from a waiter, gave me a once-over, then playfully winked at Ronald, her lips curling with that knowing smile of their class. "This one's not bad," she said, "good taste." I struggled to suppress the frown threatening to crease my brow, biting it back hard. Instinctively, I glanced up at Ronald's face. His gaze rested heavily on Ella, unreadable and probing. What is he investigating? Let me ask you, have you ever watched idol dramas? In those shows, when the CEO takes the supporting female character to a banquet and the female lead happens to see them, when she forces a smile and says you two look perfect together, and the CEO stares darkly at her face, what is he investigating? Of course, he's investigating whether the female lead is jealous or not. Unfortunately, Ella was genuinely unbothered, while Ronald, he was truly investigating Ella's reaction when she saw him with another woman. Later, I couldn't help but subtly probe him about his relationship with Ella, half-jokingly asking if it was time for me to step aside now that my role was done. Ronald just flicked the ash off his cigarette indifferently and replied with a nonchalant, "We're just friends." Friend, what an ambiguous yet proper word it is, capable of vaguely encompassing all the relationships you currently can't define. At the time, I softly murmured "oh," then lowered my head to focus intently on peeling the orange in my hands. Ronald loves eating oranges, but he has this quirk: he refuses to eat ones cut with a knife. They must be peeled by hand. At first, I was quite troubled because, as a girl, I loved having pretty nails. Peeling oranges meant I couldn't keep them too long, they'd snap under pressure and turn yellowish. After being with Ronald, I never grew my nails long again. Back in my youthful pride, I even mourned my nails a little. Now, though, I sometimes vaguely wonder, if he ends up with Ella in the future, he'll probably never need me to peel oranges for him again. Thinking about it this way, I felt a tinge of melancholy, so I peeled another one for him. When I mentioned this to my good friend Dora, she scoffed, convinced I was overthinking it, making a mountain out of a molehill. She has this classic line, "Can arranged marriages ever have real feelings? It's just one wretched capitalist tying the knot with another wretched capitalist in a flimsy bond thinner than paper ashes." Gone with the slightest breeze, I just smiled without saying a word. I've always believed in a woman's intuition, especially that of a beautiful woman. It's often more accurate than radar. I was so certain of this matter, all because of one stormy night. It was around 2 in the morning when I was jolted awake by Ronald's ringing phone, still half asleep. By the time I fully came to my senses and opened my eyes, Ronald was already sitting up, answering the call in a calm, soothing voice as he said, "Don't panic, take your time. Where are you now? It's okay. Can you see any landmark buildings now?" When this house was being renovated, Ronald only made one request: privacy and confidentiality. As a result, the soundproofing here is exceptionally thorough. Yet now, in this absolute silence, I hear the howling wind and rain from the other end of the phone, mingled with a panicked woman's voice. It strikes my skull like a heavy mallet, leaving a deafening buzz in its wake. I heard Ronald's gentle voice saying, "Ella, don't be afraid, wait for me." The bed beside me shifted lightly, then the door lock clicked, and after that, I could hear nothing more. The soundproofing in this house is truly exceptional. Once the bedroom door is closed, I can't even hear his footsteps, but when I shut my eyes, I can picture it. He walks down the hallway from the bedroom, descends the stairs, passes through the living room on the first floor, picks up his car keys, changes his shoes by the entryway, and then heads to the underground garage. I throw off the covers, walk to the window, and draw back the curtains. The storm silently batters the glass. a raindrop sliding down the smooth pane only to be washed away by another. I count softly to 3 and open my eyes. A pair of headlights emerges from the underground garage. I raise my hand and press it against the window, tracing the light with my fingers. A blink, and a tear falls soundlessly down my cheek. Later, Ronald had a gossipy friend who deliberately or unintentionally revealed to me that on that stormy, windy night, Ella's car broke down halfway on Guangzhou Road. Guangzhou Road has one peculiarity: its complex road conditions, with countless narrow alleys, earning it the nickname the labyrinth of the city center. Ella herself didn't even know the exact location. In a panic, she called Ronald and waited half an hour before Ronald miraculously appeared before her. Guangzhou Road, I silently repeated. From our place to Guangzhou Road, it usually takes at least 40 minutes by car. Without knowing Ella's exact location, he found her in half an hour. I couldn't help but think, what a damnable friendship this is. His friend Philip finally half reclined on the sofa, squinting lazily as he gave me some advice. Camille, to be honest, among all the people around Ronald, you're the one I like the most. Ella is back. You'd better start making some plans for yourself. You can't compete with Ella. She doesn't even have to do anything, just standing there. You've already lost. I raised the glass of beer in front of me, smiled at him, and downed it in one go, my way of toasting him. I heard Ronald and Ella first met in the United States. Ronald was invited back to his alma mater as a guest speaker. How they came to know and befriend each other is beyond my knowledge, but I do know that Ella met Ronald earlier than I did, and she was more virtuous and respectable than I ever was. Philip told me I could never measure up to Ella. She didn't have to do anything, just standing there. She'd already won. If I said I never wanted to compete with anyone, he'd never believe me. In the eyes of these people, no matter how much they claim to admire or like me, it can't hide the disdain they hold for me deep down. One must pay the price for their actions. My approach to Ronald was never pure in intention. It wasn't something I could choose. When I met Ronald, he wasn't married and had no girlfriend. Morally and ethically, I did nothing wrong. I was only trying, desperately trying, to live a better life, just a little more dignified, so I wouldn't be trampled by everyone. I don't think I did anything wrong. They believe the calm and unassuming demeanor I showed in front of Ronald was just a carefully crafted persona. They think that once Ronald abandons me, I'll inevitably reveal my true vixen nature, whether through relentless pestering or desperate clinging, rather than offering me advice. His friends were more like giving me a warning. The way a person's friends treat you reflects your standing in that person's heart. From the moment Philip said those words to me, I knew, after 7 years of anxiety, my own finale was finally approaching. Long, long ago, I imagined the final moment between Ronald and me countless times. In countless dramas, such a scene would undoubtedly be accompanied by a torrential downpour. I'd stubbornly tilt my head at a 45-degree angle toward the sky, refusing to let my tears fall, gazing mournfully at Ronald as he walked away without looking back. Yet in reality, it was just an utterly ordinary sunny day. Ronald rarely came for lunch at noon. The housekeeper had prepared a simple meal of 4 dishes and a soup. I remember it clearly: a tureen of spare rib and winter melon soup, a plate of braised pork, a dish of fish, a plate of lettuce, and scrambled eggs with shrimp. The Prescott family owned their own farm, dedicated to growing vegetables, raising fish and shrimp in water, and keeping livestock like cattle, sheep, chickens, ducks, and geese, all organic and free-range. These ingredients were exclusively for the Prescott family's daily meals, not for commercial sale. So, though the dishes were simple, their natural flavors were exceptionally fresh and delicious. Halfway through the meal, I began peeling an orange for Ronald. A faint citrus fragrance filled the air when Ronald suddenly spoke up. I've arranged for the villa in the western suburbs to be transferred to you. The sports car you loved last time, I've ordered it from abroad. It'll be delivered to you in a few days. He took a sip of water, wiped his mouth deliberately, and continued, the rest has been deposited into your account. You can check it yourself. With my head bowed, I meticulously, attentively, and carefully peeled the orange bit by bit. As if this were the most important task at hand, after what felt like an eternity, I heard Ronald ask me, do you have any other requests? I handed him the perfectly peeled orange and said, eat this orange. He stared at me for a long, long time before taking it and slowly eating every piece. I smiled faintly. I knew my smile was my most charming feature, so I gave him a light, subtle smile and said, I have another scene to film this afternoon, so I won't keep Mr. Ronald any longer. He nodded, his expression unreadable, his gaze lingering on my face for a moment, scrutinizing, but quickly passing over. Then he stood up, took the coat from the back of the chair, and said to me with a slight nod, "I'll take my leave now." I saw him out and stood by the door watching him leave when he suddenly turned around, his handsome brow slightly furrowed. He said, "If anything comes up in the future, you can go to Philip." I smiled and nodded. I knew this was his final indulgence toward me. For someone as decisive and unhesitating as him, uttering such words was already a rare concession after all. He detested keeping in touch after parting. I stood by the door, watching his car speed away into the distance, gradually shrinking into a tiny black dot before slowly disappearing from view. When the housekeeper arrived in the evening, she was startled. It was past 10 p.m., her usual time to come and prepare Ronald's late-night snack. I hadn't turned on the lights, so when she flicked them on and saw me sitting at the dining table, she gasped and asked, "Ms. Camille, are you all right?" I shifted my stiffened bones, realizing I had been sitting there motionless for hours without noticing, forcing a weak smile. I hadn't even spoken when the housekeeper pressed on, "What's wrong with you?" She was an elderly Shanghainese auntie, and since Ronald was from Shanghai, she often slipped into Shanghainese when flustered, rubbing my temples. I shook my head wearily and replied, "I'm fine, auntie." After a pause, I added, "You don't need to come anymore." She was utterly shocked, dropping the Shanghainese entirely as she asked, "But what about when Mr. Ronald comes back? He's used to my cooking. There are no outsiders here." So I allow myself to furrow my brows deeply, my voice almost a whisper. I shake my head and say, "He won't come back again." Dora and I traveled for a year without a destination, going wherever our hearts desired. The craziest thing we did was soak in a wild hot spring under the Albanian snow-capped mountains at night. Then on a whim bought tickets the next day to fly to Iceland to see the Northern Lights. After all, we had plenty of time and money. When I came across the news of Ronald's marriage, Dora and I were wandering through the ancient city of Medina in Marrakesh. The open-air market was bustling with crowds, vibrant silks and spice baskets everywhere, chaotic and dirty, yet with a charming medieval charm. I stood by the roadside waiting for Dora, who was picking out silk fabrics at a stall, and absent-mindedly opened my phone. The latest message was from my agent 3 days ago. Just 4 words. "Are you okay?" After breaking up with Ronald, I changed all my contact details and drew a deep divide between myself and Ronald's circle of friends, almost as if by telepathy. I opened my news feed and saw Ronald and Ella's wedding of the century. The cover photo showed a wedding snapshot, Ronald tilting his head to gaze at Ella in her snow-white wedding dress, his eyes overflowing with tenderness and devotion. My mind went blank for a moment. It wasn't until Dora shook me that I realized my hands holding the phone were trembling uncontrollably. My face must have looked ghastly, because Dora looked panicked as she asked, "What's wrong, Camille? You're scaring me." Later, Dora stayed with me in the hotel for 3 whole days. I didn't understand what was happening to me. Rationally, I knew perfectly well, who do you think you are? Even after 7 years with Ronald, do you even have the right to grieve? Yet I was utterly drained, a weariness rising from the depths of my soul that spread through every limb, making me unable to lift even a finger. I'm endlessly grateful for Dora's patience with me. After returning to China, I resumed my normal work. Even without Ronald's resources, my schedule remained packed every day. I had no particular talent for acting or singing, but fortunately, I was good-looking. These days, the public is especially forgiving of attractive people, and since I knew my limits, no diva behavior, no arrogance, just humility and low-key cooperation, big directors and brands were still willing to work with me. I met Ronald again 2 years after his marriage, at a sponsorship event for the country's top variety show. I was a regular guest, while Ronald was likely there as an investor. The industry is so small. Yet we hadn't crossed paths in 3 years, probably because he had quietly arranged it that way. Perhaps our meeting that time was because he felt 3 years had passed, and there was no longer any need to avoid appearances. I confidently joined the production team in toasting the guests, maintaining perfect composure when I reached him, holding my glass slightly lower than his. I addressed him with polite, distant self-awareness, "Mr. Ronald," during moments of utmost intimacy. When emotions ran deep, I once whispered in his ear, calling him honey. My face turned pale immediately after, but he laughed a low, quiet chuckle by my ear and asked, "What are you afraid of?" Such intimate moments now feel like a beautiful dream conjured in the haze of a fleeting illusion, so I rarely let myself dwell on them anymore. After several rounds of drinks, a producer sister who had always looked out for me asked me to deliver a set of clothes to room 302 upstairs. Clutching the evening gown, I stepped onto the plush carpet, even the towering heels of my shoes made no sound as they sank into the thick fibers. The entire third floor was deserted. Pushing the door open, I wasn't surprised to see a familiar silhouette. Ronald leaned against the window, smoking. Wisps of smoke curled from his lips, his profile as strikingly handsome as ever. Before entering, I knocked. He turned to look at me, then casually stubbed out his cigarette in the nearby ashtray. His voice was hoarse as he murmured an apology. We remained silent until he spoke first. Did you change your phone number? Philip and the others couldn't reach you. After a pause, he added, I heard you sold all those properties. Where are you living now? I hummed in acknowledgement and explained. I was just worried that old matters and people might cause trouble for you after your marriage, so I took care of everything. He must have been drunk, his brow deeply furrowed. As I stared at the crease between his eyebrows, I couldn't help but wonder, why are you still so unhappy when you've married the person you love most? His gaze was heavy as he looked at me. When our eyes met, I froze as if someone had hit pause. His expression shifted slightly as he slowly leaned toward me. I wanted to flee, but my legs felt welded to the ground. When his warm breath brushed against my face, I closed my eyes in resigned surrender, my hands clutching his lapels in near panic. He got married, which was an utterly immoral thing to do. The rational part of me was screaming hysterically inside. Yet I couldn't refuse him. I could never refuse him. 3 years of building defenses, gone in an instant, crumbling at just one glance from him, as long as it was him. I tilted my face up, eyes closed, feeling his breath graze past my lips before burying into the crook of my neck, warm and heavy. I'm sorry, he murmured, then he pushed me away. His gaze tinged with what seemed like regret, rare for him to lose control like this. Rubbing his temples, he added, sorry, I'm drunk. I forced the corners of my lips upward in a smile, like a clown, and said, it's okay. The next day, I made scandal headlines. And that's when I finally understood Ronald's apology and what it truly meant. The third floor was empty of people, the entire venue filled only with friendly media, yet Ronald and I were captured in a photo, high definition. My face tilted up with eyes closed, him bending down near my shoulder, his bangs slightly covering his eyes. Unless you knew him extremely well, you probably wouldn't recognize it was Ronald, but such an ambiguous photo without Ronald's approval, even if the media had taken it, no one would dare to publish it. My agent's phone was blown up with calls, everyone subtly probing about who this was, whether it was my boyfriend. A tidal wave of vitriol surged through the internet. Dora called and tore into Ronald with scathing fury, but I felt neither sorrow nor fear. I was genuinely, utterly confused. Why? I couldn't understand what Ronald hoped to achieve by doing this. A few days later, I understood, because at an event, I ran into Ella. She smiled when she saw me, a genuine smile, and even teased me quietly. I saw that photo. Not bad, back then. Philip and I bet you were his destined one. Philip even laughed at me. All these years, you two really are a perfect match. In that moment, it all clicked, and once it did, my heart ached for Ronald. Look, this is Ronald's beloved whom he longed to marry, yet she doesn't love him, she doesn't love him. I remember that day when Ronald's brows were tightly furrowed. He deliberately allowed this photo to be released, using me as a pawn to test Ella's reaction. I had been puzzled why such a major top-tier variety show would invite me as a regular guest. Now it makes sense, it must have been Ronald's way of compensating me. I imagine he must feel utterly defeated right now. As I watch the smiling Ella before me, I am absolutely certain she doesn't love him. Ella turned to leave. For some reason, I suddenly called out to her. She turned back, puzzled, and I gazed at her calmly, explaining word by word, Ms. Ella, Mr. Ronald and I ended things a year before he married you. We haven't seen or contacted each other since. That photo was just a misunderstanding. After a pause, I added, please remember, from the day he married you, Mr. Ronald has never betrayed you. She stared at me with her mouth agape in astonishment, as if she didn't understand what I was saying. Only I knew the reason why. I thought Ronald could use me as a pawn to test Ella. But I couldn't bear to let someone he loved misunderstand him like this. If there was even the slightest possibility between him and Ella in the distant future, I couldn't allow myself to become that lingering thorn between them. If you truly love someone, then you must understand how I feel right now. As long as Ronald has a chance to grasp happiness, I want to help him achieve it. I really, truly hope he can be happy. I announced my relationship 6 months later with a highly popular actor I met while filming a variety show. He knew everything about me, was incredibly patient and gentle, and always gave me sound advice in both life and work, guiding me like a wise elder. Being with him wasn't full of dramatic ups and downs, but it brought me a deep sense of peace. A year later, we got married. On the wedding day, while I was in the makeup room, my manager hesitantly handed me a gift. I opened it to find a simple crystal ball, inside which was a perfectly preserved moment of fireworks frozen in time. It must have been from long ago, when Ronald and I stood on the rooftop of the World Trade Center watching fireworks over the Bund. Back then, I had sighed and said, "Colored glass shatters. Rosy clouds scatter. All beautiful things in this world are fleeting." I never expected he'd still remember. Now, he had preserved those fireworks inside this crystal ball. With a handwritten wedding blessing beneath it, "May you be like these fireworks, radiant, enduring, and filled with happiness." The agent Diana was so anxious she started stuttering. "I know this is touching, but don't act impulsively, don't do anything foolish." Just then, the dressing room door opened, and my groom stood waiting by the doorway. I smiled, closed the box, and walked toward him, walking toward my own future. As Ronald said, I will shine brightly with him, happily ever after. Extra chapter. Ronald. While I was locked in my study, completely absorbed in crafting crystal balls, Philip came to find me. He looked at the materials covering the entire table, along with the discarded half-finished products I'd thrown all over the trash bin and floor, his expression utterly bewildered and incredulous. He asked me, "Ronald, what are you doing? Ronald, what are you doing?" When the news of her marriage was leaked to me by a familiar media outlet. I flew back from Los Angeles overnight. By the time my mind cleared, I had already driven to the front of her house. Sitting in the car, staring at the lights in her home, I asked myself the same question. "Ronald, what are you doing?" To be honest, I've always despised women who cling desperately. Back when Camille and I separated, I never expected her to handle it so swiftly and cleanly. She changed all her contact details, sold the properties I'd bought for her, and left no trace. At first, I didn't even notice. It wasn't until one day when a business partner gifted me a box of pearls, claiming their quality rivaled the famed Oviedo pearls discovered in 1520. I've never had much appreciation for such things, but for some reason, I opened the box and took a look. Perfectly round pearls, naturally formed, were nestled in the velvet-lined case. Suddenly, I thought of Camille. She never cared much for gold or silver, but she adored pearls. Her slender neck adorned with a string of lustrous pearls, her skin so fair it seemed to glow. On the rare nights I stayed over, I'd sometimes lean against the doorway in the morning, watching her sit at the vanity to do her makeup. Her dark brows, upturned eyes, and crimson lips. Finally, she'd open her jewelry box, her delicate, snow-white fingers gliding over the intricate compartments, picking out pairs of pearl earrings one by one, holding them up to her ears. Then she'd turn slightly toward me and ask softly, "Do these look nice?" The delicate, rounded pearls swayed beneath her ears, complementing that face. No matter what, it was always a beautiful enhancement. There haven't been many women by my side, but they've never been absent. Camille stands out as exceptionally beautiful among them all. Just like the first time we met, when she nervously dodged the bodyguards to approach me, barely suppressing her shyness as she introduced herself, saying, "Mr. Ronald, hello, my name is Camille." My displeasure vanished the moment I saw her face. Back then, she was still young, barely in her early 20s, tender enough to seem like she could be squeezed to release water, nowhere near as experienced as she is now. Even now, I can still vividly recall the blush on her face, spreading from her ears down to her neck, her entire body trembling with fear, yet utterly breathtaking. I immediately recalled a leopard cat I once raised that had just turned 1 month old, a tiny, trembling ball of fluff puffing up its fur in a fierce display while cradled in a human palm, baring its teeth in a show of false ferocity. Camille was exactly like that leopard cat. So I waved off the bodyguards lurking around the garden as they slowly closed in, then reached out to pinch her chin and lift her face. She obediently closed her eyes at my touch, her long lashes fluttering like butterflies ready to take flight. The sight of this box of pearls made me think of her again, so I kept only the pearls and handed them to Philip, saying, "Give these to Camille for me." After a pause, I added, "Don't tell her they're from me." After we parted ways, I sent her the gift simply because I thought the pearls suited her, but I didn't want her to misunderstand, to mistake it as some lingering hint of connection between us. I'm the kind of person who never looks back. I just didn't expect that Philip would make a call, then look up at me with a half smile and say, "It's a dead number." He gave me a mischievous once-over and teased, "You're slipping, Ronald. Your little sweetheart changed her number without telling you." It wasn't just her phone number, her private line had changed too. I can't quite recall what I felt at that moment, probably something between amusement and exasperation. Philip tossed the box over and said, "You deliver it yourself. I can't be bothered tracking people down just to deliver a box of pearls." I weighed the red velvet box in my hand, and then, without quite knowing what I was thinking, actually drove to her place. I knew she had no schedule during that time. The properties I bought for her ranged from suburban villas to downtown apartments. That day, I drove around the entire city only to discover she had sold every single one. When I pulled over by the roadside, I laughed in bitter fury, picked up the box of pearls from the passenger seat, and flung it out the window before driving off without a backward glance. At this point, even a fool would understand what she meant. Later, Philip mentioned her and sighed, saying, "That Camille usually keeps to herself, but she's actually quite ruthless. We used to think she stayed by your side for so long because she was meek, but now it seems she was meek because she truly didn't love you, Ronald." He always enjoyed spectating and running his mouth, seizing every chance to mock me. I ignored him. The last time I saw her was at a sponsorship event for a variety show. I was the biggest investor, and she came over with the creative team to toast. Later, in a quiet, empty room on the third floor, I casually asked her, "Did you change your phone number? Philip and the others couldn't reach you." After a pause, I added, "I heard you sold all those properties. Where are you living now?" She gave a soft hum and explained quietly, "I just didn't want old matters or people to cause trouble for you after your marriage, so I took care of everything." She kept dodging the question and never told me where she lived. I felt somewhat disheartened. There were many things demanding my attention, and I had no time to dwell on a woman I'd casually cast aside. Days passed, until today, when I learned she was getting married. Camille didn't tell me where she lived. But there's nothing I can't find out. I lit a cigarette outside her building. The wispy smoke curled upward, its faint scent permeating the confined space. I don't smoke much. I detest anything that can lead to addiction and loss of control. More often than not, I simply light a cigarette to watch it burn, inhaling the scent. Such an atmosphere helps me stay calm and think through many things. As the cigarette burned to its end, I saw Camille, accompanied by a tall figure. Both were dressed casually, carrying numerous bags, likely just back from the supermarket. Honestly, I'd never seen Camille like this before. She wore a loose t-shirt, jeans, and flat white sneakers, with a black mask covering most of her face. Yet her eyes held a quiet smile as she listened to the man beside her, an expression entirely unfamiliar to me. This was a side of her I'd never witnessed. In front of me, she was never like this, always in full makeup, maintaining elegance even in a bathrobe. Every word spoken to me was carefully weighed, fearing any displeasure. Philip once called her fake, saying every moment with me was like she was ready to walk a red carpet. This wasn't the right moment for reminiscing. I didn't let her see me and drove away. Back home, I sat drinking alone in the empty room, absent-mindedly turning on the TV that hadn't been used for years. I flipped to the variety show where they first fell in love. Only when I saw the sponsor logo in the opening credits did I remember I was the one who had invested in this show. The man Camille was with is a famous actor. The two of them have a massive fan base shipping them as a couple. I didn't need to search frame by frame. Someone had already edited compilation clips of just the two of them. Alone in the pitch-black screening room, I watched their love story unfold on screen. There are many sweet cuts. And it's possible the production team intentionally edited them this way, but one scene left me with a lump in my throat. Her team lost the game, and the penalty was jumping into the pool from a 5-meter high diving board. Camille, who is afraid of heights and water, remained frozen on the board for a long time, unable to move. The other guests were egging her on from the sidelines, but only one man stepped forward. He walked into the pool, stood beneath her, looked up, and said, "Camille, don't be afraid, I'll catch you." The impact from a 5-meter drop was no joke, and the other guests teased him about it, but only Camille, looking down from that height, met his gaze with utmost seriousness. The CP fans of these two would probably love this scene. The edited freeze frame was overflowing with pink hearts and a rosy filter, accompanied by some unbearably sweet love song of unknown title. When their eyes met, I inappropriately recalled something from many years ago. She was filming a period drama then, and I happened to visit the set on a whim. There was a scene where she was supposed to fly on wires from a cliff down to the riverbank. During the wire adjustment, the equipment malfunctioned. She suddenly dropped mid-air to the base of the cliff, rolled further down, and finally stopped about 5 to 6 meters up from the bottom, clinging desperately to a protruding rock edge with tears streaming down her frightened face. Below the cliff was a bottomless lake. Making rescue difficult, she had to jump onto a boat from above, but despite the crew's best efforts, She couldn't bring herself to do it. Eventually, I accompanied the rescue boat to position directly beneath her. Looking up, I stretched out my hands and said, "I'll catch you." With tear-filled eyes, she gazed at me. I didn't understand why she placed such immense trust in me when she had been too afraid to jump despite the crew's hour-long persuasion. Almost instantly, she closed her eyes and leaped into my arms. The tremendous impact sent us stumbling backward into the cabin, but I held her securely in my embrace, cradling her trembling form. I soothed, "Don't be afraid, see, I caught you, didn't I?" Her lashes fluttered twice before she opened her eyes wide to look at me. In those dark pupils, my smiling face was clearly reflected. I'm not usually a patient person, yet strangely, I found myself occasionally willing to comfort her. When Camille and I were together, aside from fearing trouble, I was actually quite a decent lover at heart. I don't know Camille's exact moment of deciding to marry that man, but knowing Camille as I do, that poolside encounter must have been the pivotal turning point in their relationship. After turning off the TV, an inexplicable rage surged from nowhere. I called the producer of that variety show and vented my misplaced anger, while the executive producer kept apologizing obsequiously on the other end of the line, yet the gloom in my heart remained unresolved, leaving me sleepless all night. Not getting enough rest made me feel terrible the next day. When I drove to pick up Ella, she looked at me and smiled. "Come on, senior, don't be so angry. Think about it, you've hardly faced any setbacks in your life so far. Consider this my way of helping you stay grounded. Just laugh it off and move on." She thought my dark expression was because we were going to get divorced today. No matter how I truly felt, I always maintained a gentlemanly and considerate demeanor in front of women. Rubbing my temples, I apologized to her. "Sorry," she shrugged, looking at me with some concern, and asked, "Are you okay?" This nameless restlessness and suppressed anger couldn't be shared with others, so I politely replied, "I'm fine." She tactfully didn't ask further. Ella and I got married 3 years ago, or roughly 3 years ago. I don't remember too clearly. She's a perfect person, an ideal wife, with an excellent family background, and she herself is intelligent, generous, and capable. The first time I saw her was when I was invited to give a speech at my alma mater, where she was still a graduate student at the time. My speech was a great success. Successful people have that privilege, where no matter what they say, a room full of students treats their words as gospel. At that moment, she was the only one who raised her hand, stood up, tilted her head, and fluttered her big eyes while smiling brightly. "Senior," she said, "I don't agree with your perspective." Senior, how amusing. It was the first time since graduation that someone had called me that, and so, I remembered her, a girl whose smile was especially radiant. Our families have been close friends for generations. And after she returned to China, we started seeing each other more often. I found her to be a fascinating person, warm, cheerful, and with a laugh that could brighten anyone's mood. During business dinners with her father, he would sometimes chuckle and say, "This daughter of mine, who knows what kind of man she'll end up marrying?" Only a father would understand. No matter who she marries, I'd still worry. Then, shifting the topic, he'd add, "Mr. Ronald is someone I could trust, though." I glanced at Ella standing in the distance, bored. She was teasing a child at the next table, dangling the hotel's complimentary candies in front of the little one, who watched with wide, longing eyes, sucking on their fingers. I couldn't help but laugh. I genuinely liked Ella at one point, but when I heard she already had someone she loved and was heartbroken over them, my feelings gradually faded. Later I met Camille. Camille stayed with me for 7 years. A full 7 years and 3 months. Sometimes I wonder myself, how could any woman remain by my side for so long? But over all these years, she was the only exception. Apart from her, I doubt any woman could last more than 6 months with me. In the end, it was really only her. At one point, the most absurd rumor was circulating that I had settled down. A friend of mine, Peter, even set up a betting pool, wagering on whether Camille could tame me and officially become the rightful Mrs. Prescott. I laughed and cursed him at the time, brushing it off. Then one day, he called me in astonishment, as if sharing a joke. "Damn, Ronald, that little girlfriend of yours, what was her name again?" "Right, Camille, she actually placed a bet." "Ha ha ha, this is too funny. Guess what she bet on?" "It shouldn't be. She wouldn't rise to the occasion and officially become the rightful Mrs. Prescott." Peter's curiosity faded, and he asked me sheepishly, "Damn, how did you know?" Because I knew Camille well enough, or at least, I was utterly convinced of it before we parted ways. She was the most understanding and compatible woman I'd ever been with. I couldn't fathom how anyone could fit me so perfectly. After the initial adjustments, every time I so much as lifted an eyelid, I felt she already knew what I wanted, yet she wasn't blindly obedient either. Occasionally, she'd display those little feminine quirks, coquettishness or playful sulking, but always within the bounds of what I was willing to tolerate. Her docility could melt your heart, her coyness could soften you, and even her feigned anger was perfectly measured, and I was always willing to indulge her. I doted on her as my girlfriend, sometimes affectionately adding little before the term, because she occasionally displayed untimely childishness and silliness. For instance, she might boldly ask me, "Will you go bankrupt?" What kind of question is that? At my level of success, what I earn is no longer just money. As the mayor of this city once told me, if I were to fall, the city's GDP would regress by at least a decade. When I asked her why she would say such a thing, she would playfully pout, half jokingly, "Because I've thought about it. Unless you go bankrupt, I'll never have you in this lifetime." As she spoke these words, the corners of her eyes lifted with a faint, ambiguous smile, making it impossible to discern whether she was sincere or not. But I didn't press her further. Between a man and a woman, without long-term intentions, one cannot seriously delve into an issue. Year after year, year after year, when I decided to marry Ella, I parted ways with Camille. Play is play, but once married, I would grant my legal partner a fundamental right: respect. The decision to marry was a hasty one. Made on a rainy night when I found the lost Ella on Guangzhou Road, she looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, and asked, "Will you marry me?" Whenever a woman asks you this question with tears streaming down her face, there are only two possibilities. Either she loves this person to the point of devastation, or the one she loves so deeply has broken her heart, leaving her ready to settle for just anyone in her despair. Ella was undoubtedly the latter. I never imagined a day would come when I'd be associated with the word settle. Ella was the only one who ever made my heart skip a beat. Back then, I was so arrogant, believing there was nothing in this world I couldn't obtain. Moreover, there was no one more suited to marry me than Ella. We were perfectly matched in every way: social status, family values, and everything else. I agreed. Settling matters with my female companion before marriage is my way of showing respect to my future wife. I hesitated for a long time before parting ways with Camille, one of the rare moments when I found myself indecisive. My very first acquisition case as a young man had brought me instant fame, and I rarely made wrong decisions, yet at that time, I was uncertain. Philip couldn't stand seeing me like that, so he went ahead to confront Camille. Later, he came back and told me, "Ronald, Camille is different. If you tell her it's over, she won't make a scene or upset you." His words didn't bring me relief. Instead, they left me stifled, but I had to admit he was right. The weather was beautiful on the day we parted. For the first time, I drove so slowly, thinking endlessly along the way about what to say and how to say it without sounding too cruel. I had never been this considerate before. In the past, such matters were handled by others on my behalf. But I didn't want anyone else to witness Camille's humiliation. After all, we had been together for over 7 years. I owed her this last bit of dignity. In the end, none of the carefully prepared words I had rehearsed on the road were spoken. I simply told her over dinner, "The villa in the western suburbs, I've already arranged for it to be transferred to you. I've already had someone order that sports car you loved last time from abroad. It'll be delivered to you in a few days. The rest has been transferred to your account. You can check your balance." Finally, I asked her, "Do you have any other requests? Whatever it is, I'll fulfill it for you." Ever since I started speaking, she had been peeling an orange with her head bowed. I didn't understand why she took such pleasure in peeling oranges for me by hand. In my experience, girls usually treasure their nails, getting all sorts of manicures, but not her. Her nails were neatly trimmed, with healthy half-moons, white tinged with pink. On the first night we were together, she peeled an orange for me. In the sealed room, she sat awkwardly at the dining table, visibly uneasy. She looked so adorable in that state that I couldn't resist teasing her a little. So, I deliberately stayed silent and just stared at her. Growing nervous, as if to ease the tension, she foolishly picked up an orange from the fruit bowl on the table and forced a smile, saying, "Mr. Ronald, let me peel an orange for you." There was a fruit knife right beside her, but she stubbornly insisted on peeling it by hand, staining both her hands with yellow juice. I couldn't help but chuckle softly before leaning in to kiss her. Instinctively, she tried to push me away with her hands but then realized they were covered in orange juice. Helplessly, she rested her wrists on my shoulders, murmuring weakly between kisses, "Wait, my hands are dirty, Mr. Ronald." I laughed and said, "Then you'd better be careful not to get any on me later." It was her first time, and she was so nervous that she kept clutching the half-peeled orange tightly in her palm. By the end, the entire room was filled with the scent of oranges, and the bedsheet was soaked in orange juice. Of course, some inevitably got on me too, but even more of the orange fragrance emanated from her fingertips, her hair, and the nape of her neck. She curled beneath me, her smooth, rounded shoulders exposed, her eyes brimming with tears that clung precariously, like quicksilver, both shy and fearful, as she asked, "What should we do, Mr. Ronald? It's all over you." She was practically killing me. Food and lust are human nature. Perhaps that's when I fell in love with the scent of oranges. I never liked eating hand-peeled oranges because I found them dirty, but I loved watching her lower her head to peel them for me, bit by bit, after having her peel them for me twice. She probably thought I really enjoyed eating them that way, so every time I visited, she'd peel one for me. Eventually, it became a habit. The day we parted, after I asked if there was anything else she needed, she handed me a perfectly peeled orange and said, "Eat this orange." After Ella and I walked out of the civil affairs office, she patted my shoulder and said, "Senior, I'm sorry about this. Let me treat you to a meal." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, truth be told. Neither of us owed the other an apology. 3 years of marriage had been a poor experience for both of us. I had always thought I was fond of Ella, but on our wedding night, when Ella closed her eyes and lifted her head as if facing execution, I found I couldn't bring myself to kiss her. I never push myself too hard. So I quickly let go of Ella, rubbing my temples as I apologized to her. She also let out a soft sigh, opened her eyes to look at me, and said, "I'm sorry too." The awkward tension vanished instantly, and both of us couldn't help but laugh. Some people might just be better suited as friends, not anything more intimate. Later, I asked myself why I couldn't bring myself to kiss her. In a moment I was reluctant to admit. I realized it was probably because I thought of Camille. My first kiss with Camille was the day after we first met. She nervously closed her eyes, tightly gripping the buttons of my shirt, her whole body tense, pressing my lips against hers. I murmured, "Relax." She tried her best to comply, but only seemed to grow even more rigid, her face wearing an expression of grim determination. I don't know why, after we parted, I would think of her so often. While having dinner with Ella and talking about our love lives, she suddenly said to me, seemingly out of nowhere, "Do you remember that time you and Camille made the news?" A few days after that, we met, and she very seriously explained to me that there was nothing between you two, that it had ended a year before we got married, and asked me not to misunderstand you. "Senior, I've always felt guilty about the marriage situation with you, but Camille seems like a really good person." If, she trailed off, then covered her hesitation by taking a sip of wine. "Ha ha ha, my own love life is such a mess. Who am I to give you advice?" I remember that incident. It was at that variety show sponsorship event, after asking Camille for her new address and getting no response. I leaned in to kiss her. Though Ella and I had already decided to divorce, we weren't officially separated yet. At the last moment before our lips met, I mustered all my willpower to turn my head away because her hands clutching my collar were trembling with fear. I couldn't be that shameless. At least wait until after the divorce, that's what I thought at the time. Later, I instructed the media to leak photos of me and her in the room because of a certain investor behind that variety show. As I was going upstairs, I overheard him saying to someone beside him, "Hey, that Camille, I never noticed before, but up close, wow, she's really something." At the time, I gave him a cold glance, and later, I directed the media to release that photo. She was tilting her head back with her eyes closed, while I buried my face in the crook of her neck, my hair falling to obscure my features, but it was enough to cast a protective net, quietly drawing her under my wing, silently warning off those prying eyes with ill intentions. I just don't know how she ended up meeting Ella, or why she said those things to her, but it was all too late. I had always been certain she wouldn't leave. I never imagined she'd decide to marry someone else so soon. This out-of-control emotion is only temporary. Ella, after parting ways, I returned to my place, lit a cigarette, stood on the terrace overlooking the downtown scenery, and silently told myself this in my heart. I was born with a cold temperament and rarely care deeply about anything. If I divorce Ella, and Camille is alone, I would go to her, but I'm certain I wouldn't marry her. If I can't marry her, I won't disturb her when she's about to have a perfect marriage. Because I can't bear that responsibility. After all, it's been 7 years. I suppose there's still some nostalgia lingering. I was preparing to give her a wedding gift. The list of potential presents kept coming in, but after much deliberation, none seemed satisfactory. Philip came over and laughed at me. "What are you up to, Ronald? It's just a woman. You're making such a fuss." searching everywhere just to give a wedding gift. He paused deliberately to provoke me. Did she even send you a wedding invitation? I certainly didn't get one. I didn't voice the thoughts in my heart, instead offering an excuse. After all, it's been 7 years. We should part on good terms. In the end, I decided to give her a crystal ball because that night, someone was setting off fireworks by the river. Amidst the dazzling display, I remembered something. One year, I took her to the top of the World Trade Center to watch fireworks, and she sighed. Colored glass shatters easily, and rosy clouds disperse. All beautiful things in this world are fleeting. The melancholy and regret in her eyes at that moment were so palpable, it made me feel as though a lifetime had passed. Suddenly, I wanted to gift her fireworks that would never fade. The snow globe was handmade by me. As a chemistry major in college, I knew the tiny specks of fireworks were too intricate, especially inside a snow globe where colors struggle to stand out. I experimented with nearly 100 materials before barely settling on one, then meticulously painted each speck. Even the Wall Street merger wars were easier than this. But in the end, I succeeded. Before her wedding, I had someone deliver the snow globe to her agent, asking them to pass it on to Camille, along with a handwritten wedding blessing. May you be as brilliant and enduring as these fireworks, filled with happiness and fulfillment. She accepted it and had someone convey her thanks to me. Another sleepless night. I was in the U.S. on their wedding day, busy from morning till night. I can't say if it was intentional, but Philip sent me a clip of her wedding. Many years ago, Philip was deceived by a woman who took his money, played with his heart, and even cuckolded him. At the time, I mercilessly mocked him. After all these years, he finally got his revenge. Truth be told, I had never, not even once before, imagined Camille in a wedding dress, but the video came abruptly and left no room for denial. She was beautiful, even when crying, clad in snow-white bridal gown, accepting a ring from another man. She had acted in numerous wedding scenes and worn wedding dresses more than once, but only this one felt utterly real. When I closed the video, I raised my hand to touch my chest, as if silently reminding myself, this was just a scene, an incredibly realistic one. Once they exchanged rings, someone would inevitably shout cut for this marriage. I tried hard to ignore the dull ache in my chest. I've said it before, I detest anything that can become addictive and uncontrollable. Camille, just like my smoking habit, I believe I can control this loss of control. I had achieved it. From that moment on, she vanished completely from my life. But there was an aftermath. The hidden pain didn't disappear. It would suddenly resurface after being ignored for a very, very long time. The first time I truly faced the fact that she had become someone else's wife was 3 years later. I happened to be bored and in the mood for some fun, so I accompanied a female friend shopping for bags, shoes, and cosmetics. When we reached the children's section, she put on an affected look at the tiny clothes, then covered the corner of her mouth with a giggle. How adorable, utterly foolish. I darkened my expression and turned to leave only to see Camille. She was holding hands with her husband, who carried a doll-like little girl in his arms. The child's eyes, round, pitch black, and unblinking, resembled hers as they stared at me. Meanwhile, she and her husband bent their heads together, picking out a dress for their daughter. I stood rooted to the spot, my mind buzzing as if struck by lightning. Yet the female companion behind me couldn't read the room, sticking to me like stubborn gum. She cast a suspicious glance at Camille before asking me, "Mr. Ronald, what's wrong?" Camille was probably startled by the commotion and looked over in my direction. I felt utterly exposed, though fortunately, she appeared indifferent. For a brief moment, surprise flickered across her face as her gaze shifted from me to the woman beside me, then paused. I quickly explained, I got divorced 3 years ago. The words were strange and abrupt. I'd never done anything so foolish before, but Camille paused, then smiled at me. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, we went our separate ways. After returning, I flew into a rage. That female companion fearfully grabbed my sleeve, only for me to slap her to the ground. Deep down, I knew I was taking my anger out on her, but I had lost control. 8 years ago, when Camille and I parted ways, I felt nothing. That ache resembling heartbreak, I thought, was merely habit, the habit of having someone by my side, the discomfort when she left home, 3 years ago. When Camille got married, the pain that seeped uncontrollably through every crevice of my heart, I told myself was just a simple loss of control, but I was adept at controlling such losses. 3 years later, seeing Camille standing before me with her happy family, the fury and jealousy I had suppressed for so many years finally boiled up from the depths of my heart. Only then did I have to admit the truth. I like Camille, not out of habit, not because of time. But to the point where it's beyond my control. If I can't control this loss of control, then I might as well indulge my desires. I called Peter, who has some shady connections to handle grey area matters. Over the years, I've rarely dabbled in anything illegal. Once you reach a certain level, many things become trivial. But this time, I decided to act. When the call connected, I got straight to the point. Let's make a deal, handle something for me, and make sure there are no loose ends. There was a long silence on the other end, then a sudden chuckle as he asked me. Couldn't hold back anymore. The next day, somehow Philip found out about it and rushed over in a panic. Ronald, have you lost your mind? I remained silent, taking a slow sip of water before replying. Philip, you're the last person who has any right to speak on this. I remember back then, when Mary's lover had both his legs broken by you. It was during that crackdown. If I'd arrived any later, I'd have had to help you collect his corpse. So tell me, what gives you the right to say that now? I've never been one to wound him with such harsh words. Between brothers, we've always known our boundaries and limits, but this time, I swiftly turned the attack on him, unwilling to hear him expose the truth. After all these years, that incident still hits Philip hard. With reddened eyes, he didn't say much, just gave my shoulder a heavy pat before leaving, uttering one last sentence. Ronald, Camille could cut all ties with you the moment you broke up. Someone like that doesn't love you. If you don't want to regret it, don't touch her husband. I remained silent. Philip said she didn't love me. I scoffed at the idea. It's not that she didn't love me, she was just too clear-headed. In her 3rd year by my side, one night when I was half drunk, I woke up groggily in the middle of the night to find someone touching my face. Her hand was very, very light, tracing from my brow down the bridge of my nose, mapping every inch, before finally pausing at the edge of my lips. A warm breath drew near, and she nestled her head ever so gently against my chest, curling her whole body toward me. I heard her murmurs, calling my name over and over again. Ronald, Ronald, Ronald. This love that cannot be spoken aloud lingers between lips and teeth. Hidden within the years she has spent by my side, I don't like women around me developing feelings for me, because once they do, they want more. The more they want, the more they demand. Expectations begin to form, and for me, such expectations are a burden. I got up and left that morning before she woke. For about 3 months afterward, I didn't contact her. In the 4th month, she called my assistant. She didn't say much, just asked one question. The oranges on the farm had a good harvest, and the villagers sent them all to me. Should I have someone deliver some to you? Once, a woman threatened to kill herself after we broke up, crying hysterically and asking me, "Do you even have a heart?" I just found it annoying. Some women think too much. If you want to stay by my side, you have to be prepared. It's a straightforward transaction. We're all adults here. Everything is clear and consensual. Don't expect anything from me except money. But Camille was different. As if I were bewitched, that night I told myself to give her one more chance. I called her back and said I'd join her for dinner. The moment I hung up, I could almost hear her sobbing. After that, she kept to her place, and we coexisted peacefully. Not long after, a film she starred in won the Golden Broom Award. She came home clutching the trophy and immediately started crying in my arms. I absent-mindedly comforted her for a while. Just as I was growing impatient, she suddenly brightened up. Smiling at me, she said, "Oh well, it's not like my best acting happens on screen anyway." She didn't use it on screen, she just poured all her best acting skills into me, wholeheartedly playing the role of someone who didn't love me, thinking it was her little secret, and I turned a blind eye to her flawed performance, playing the part of a dutiful, deaf and dumb audience member, never once calling out her little schemes. But after all these years, I suddenly don't want to be that dutiful, deaf and dumb audience anymore. I want to invite the leading lady of the final curtain call back to my side. This time, she won't have to act so hard at not loving me. I'll give her the grandest love instead. Perhaps it's only when someone truly experiences loss that they realize what they want most. It wasn't until I lost her that I finally understood. What I wanted was simple. Just like before, with only the two of us, I wanted her to belong to me, and only me, forever and always. Peter had arranged everything flawlessly. Her husband was recently filming a period drama deep in the mountains when equipment malfunctioned. The safety wire failed, and he fell from the cliff. There were simply too many ways to make it look like an accident. Before taking action, for some reason I couldn't explain, I found an opportunity to see her one last time. It appeared to be the most ordinary of coincidences. I brought a female companion along to stage a chance encounter with her. At the time, she was at an amusement park with her daughter. When we went over to greet them, she was crouched halfway down in front of her child, coaxing her while holding an ice cream cone, her tone firm. No, we agreed you'd only have one bite. The little girl wore a pink bunny ear headband with her hair in 2 ponytails, sweet and adorable as she clung to her mother's arm, wriggling like sticky rice cake. Please, just one more lick, I wasn't ready last time. She stuck out her tiny pink tongue to show her mom, only got the very tip of her tongue on it. That doesn't count as a bite. Okay. I watched Camille as she faced the little girl's coquetry. She immediately stuffed the remaining ice cream into her own mouth and even opened her mouth to show the child. No can do, mommy ate it all. The little girl was shocked, disappointed, and burst into loud wails. My heart ached, a pain mingled with jealous rage. I couldn't help thinking, if this were mine and Camille's daughter, if she were to pout and ask me for ice cream like this, I'd probably throw all principles to the wind and offer her the finest ice cream in the world, if only. But there are no ifs. Camille stood up and turned to see me, momentarily stunned before greeting me with natural, poised grace. Mr. Ronald, her gaze was so calm, as if I were just an ordinary friend she hadn't seen in years, someone not particularly familiar, suddenly reunited. The crowd surged, her small figure disappearing between the gaps of people. I bent down, picked her up, and sat her on my shoulders. She didn't even struggle. Her body was tiny, fragrant, her little hands soft as they rested on my ears, letting out exclamations of wonder. Wow, Mom, look. Camille looked at me in surprise, her expression slightly flustered, and said uneasily, Mr. Ronald, I don't actually like children. I find them noisy and bothersome. I was even surprised at myself for doing this. Before I could think too deeply about it, the little girl on my shoulders suddenly reached out to her mother and called out, Mom, can we video call Dad? I miss him. Camille glanced at me. Finally unable to resist the commotion, she video called her husband. The little girl was thrilled, sitting on my shoulders and holding up her phone to show her dad the parade floats, ending with a soft, coquettish whimper. Daddy, I miss you so much. I turned my head to look at Camille. She stood beside me, smiling tenderly at her husband and child, her eyes gentle. When her lashes lowered, it was just like when she used to peel oranges for me years ago. My gaze drifted downward, and I noticed her slender fingernails. She did love me once, I'm certain of it. The Camille by my side was always cautious and insecure, but now she's relaxed and at ease. I have to admit, she's been much happier since leaving me. Watching the smile on her face, I made peace with myself. I thought, let it be, just let it be, let it be, let her stay this happy forever. The crowd was bustling with boisterous joy, yet amidst this surging tide of happiness, I stood quietly gazing at her for a long time, bidding my final farewell. I think for the rest of my life, I'll never eat oranges again. The end.